welcome back to my channel. So today, as you will see by the title, is a tutorial day, and we are learning how to make these rustic, chunky, raw copper heart pendants or components, whatever you choose to make out of the piece, to be honest. So this is the piece here with a jump ring attached so that you can have it as a pendant on the angle. Oh, sorry, the sun's arriving. So this is the actual piece that I've demoed in the tutorial. As I said, you'll be able to make this. This is one that I made as a sort of a test run. It's a little bit smaller by comparison, but again, the options are very, very limitless with this design. It's something that you can scale up or scale down. And again, change the gauges of wires, whatever you want, to have a bit of fun. But I just love this. It's a very simple, easy wire work piece, no weaving involved, apart from tiny bit here where you just have to secure this section. Very minor, but yeah, great beginner's project, just a bit of fun. I have got an alternative version where I've actually done it in a smaller scale and done a woven detail. There we go. So you see that there. This hasn't been filmed as of this point of me doing this video, but I do intend to do a tutorial for this. And when I do, I will edit a card in at some point or put the description for that link down below for you to see the woven version. When I've done that, it's next on my list of things to do. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into the video. Okay, so the materials that you're going to need for this project are very simple. A 1.5 gauge bare copper wire and a 0.315 bare copper wire to go with it. This wire is simply to do the binding section just here on your heart. So a 0.4 would also work, and even maybe a 0.6. It's just to secure that wire together. It's very tiny bit of wire needed for that. The majority of the wire is done with this 1.5 bare copper. The tools that you need for the project, again, are very simple, very minimal. You have here your chain nose pliers. These are going to be an essential for this project. You have your round nose pliers. Again, these are going to be needed to create that kind of curve and swirl. Your flush cutters. Now, it's quite important that your flush cutters are a more stronger brand of flush cutters. So, oh, sorry. So your Xeron pliers are going to be too fine to use with the gauge of wire that we're using. So please make sure that the flush cutters that you use, or the cutters that you use, are good for cutting a stronger gauge of wire. Okay, and you might be wondering what this is for. This is a bit of soft foam sandpaper. This is used just to polish and bring up the colour of the bare copper wire. These are additional options that you can use for this project. I do think I had this in the previous picture. I just forgot to explain why. This is a ring mandrel, and this is just going to be used if you wanted to create that nice curve. It's good as a mandrel to create the shoulder of the heart and get that nice consistent shape. Again, the mandrel, the bell making pliers that we have here are also going to be used just if you want to get that smaller shape in your heart for this little angle just here. So it's nice to have a slightly smaller diameter tool. So that's those and that. And then we have here the hammer and plate. Sorry, mine's a little bit grubby, but this is your steel plate, and I do have a sandbag underneath it just to help sort of deaden the sand a little bit and sort of take a little bit of the shock as well. This is optional, but this is essential if you're going to use the hammer. Okay. So let's get down to the project itself. So I'm going to show you something very quickly. I'm just going to touch on this before we actually go into the project. Now, I'm using bare copper wire, and I'm using the bare copper wire because, as I previously mentioned, it's soft, it's easy to use. I personally love copper. I love the colour of copper, and I love the properties of copper. So also the fact that it's going to be easy to hammer, easy to manipulate, and it's going to hold its strength. So for me, it's a great all-rounder. I have given you options. If you wanted to use a plated, I have explained how you would go about that. If you do use a copper wire and it arrives tarnished like this, and I will show you what I mean by that. So these are both bare copper wires. This is how they arrive. This is its more natural shiny colour, and this is the tarnish. Now, bare copper will naturally tarnish, and it does tarnish quite quickly as a process. It's oxidizing. It's what the actual wire itself does. It's what it's known for doing. Now, there are a couple of ways you can stop and preserve this, which are using products such as Protector Clear or Renaissance Wax. You pop both of these products over your finished piece. It will really slow down. It won't stop the process, but it will really slow down the process of the tarnishing. So if you have your wire at a tarnish color that you particularly like, you can put the product on and it will make it stay at that for a longer time. Now, just touching on the products you can coat your wire with, or, you know, protect your wire with, a lot of people like bare copper because it does have, it's said to have medicinal properties and help issues such as your arthritis and joint issues and so on. So a lot of people do like to wear bare copper for that reason. I will just say, if you do put the Renaissance Wax or Potato Clear on it, that does limit or restrict those healing sort of medicinal properties a little bit, so just be aware of that. If you do intend to sell your jewellery, I always say give people the option, ask them if you want it to be coated with this product to reduce the tarnishing process. So that's just my disclaimer. Now, what I do want to show you, and I go back to the sandpaper that we had, which is here. So this is how sometimes they arrive like this. It depends how long it's been stored for and the traveling process or whatever. So these have both arrived in these conditions to me. I've got my nice bright shiny, this is a lower gauge, and then I've got my 1.5, which is this more tarnished look. Now I just wanted to show you, if you use this sandpaper, I've done a little bit here, but can you see how this is a lot more shinier than this section just here? So all you do is, and it brings it back to its polished state. So please, if it does arrive and it's darker, don't panic and think, oh, I've got the wrong wire, or mine's, you know, it's tarnished, I can't use it, because you can. You just polish it back up. But if you polish it up, you're going to have a nice bright shiny heart. Now, a lot of people do a process called oxidizing, and so if you oxidize a piece, you're basically creating this tarnish process, speeding it up. You use a product called liver of sulfur gel, or I think you can buy it in sort of like a powdery chunk form, and you pop it into some warm water. I'm not going to go into depth, there are videos on that, but what you do is you put your finished bright shiny piece into the liver of sulfur water or mix that you've made up. It smells really bad, I'm not going to lie, and it will naturally darken your wire or your metal sheet. If you're using sheet, anything that's bare copper, it will naturally darken it. Now you can dip it and get it to go to this process, or you can put it in and it will go black almost. You can put products in with it such as salt or coffee. That creates a lovely rainbow kind of colour across your product, your piece. So that's a really nice option. But what you then do is you then take again your polish, and you can polish it up and it gives this textured look. So I actually want to use this tarnished wire and keep it tarnished, so I don't have to oxidize it. So when I do polish it, and because of the texture I've created on this piece, I've almost got the effect as if I'd oxidized it. I've got those kind of dark and low lights. I'm going to show you the difference. So this was a little sample piece I was messing around with that I polished before I started forming. So I polished this wire before I started forming the shape. This is the piece that I did with the tarnished wire and then polished afterwards. Can you see the difference in the colours? So this has got that kind of like the tarnish has remained in the sort of the dips in the parts of it. And I really like that effect. It's personal preference. So if you do want to have a nice shiny heart to start with, just polish the wire before you actually start the project. If you want to have this kind of effect, use the tarnished wire if you have it. So there we go. Now, I've cut my wire, and the length of wire that you use is up to you and your personal preference. The size of the heart that you're going to have is going to be obviously dictated by the length of wire that you have. Now, this particular piece that I've cut is 15 inches or 38 centimetres, and I'm not quite sure if that's going to give me the same size heart, but this particular piece that I've done here is about 5.5 centimetres in diameter, and probably if I go to the highest point, about just under 5 centimetres at the highest part of the heart here. I want to have enough wire to be able to do this whole movement. this whole piece is created with one piece of wire and then just the tiniest little bit of 0.315 just to secure the wire here. So I want to really make sure that, So I want to make sure that I can do this whole piece with this one piece of wire, which means I'm going to form this whole shape. It's not one that I can add into, so I want to make sure I have enough wire for that. So I personally like to cut a longer piece of wire and then make sure that I can complete the piece. It's a lot easier to do that than try to add in. This is not an add-in style component. Now this is done that you can hang it on sort of the angle here, pop a jump ring just here and have that on a long piece of chain or a short piece of chain. You could also pop a jump ring here and attach chain either side and just have it as a center heart piece. So it's got a lot of versatility to what you actually decide to do with this sort of pendant, really. Okay, so I'm going to come in with this wire, and the first thing, I'm going to do is take my round nose pliers, and I'm going to try not to hit the camera. And what I want to do is come right to the end. Now, when you're using a heavier gauge of wire, what you want to do is make sure that your ends of your wire are nice and straight, because it will show. For example, when you see here, the ends of the wire are here and here, and you can see because it's a straight edge, it is a straight finish. If it was cut with the flush part of the cutters, which hopefully I've got on this side. So if I just cut a little piece of wire, just a tiny bit, I'm going to cut it so that you can see. So, can you see how this piece here is angled? So it's at an angle. So if I was to hammer that, that angle or that cut will show. Okay, so if you have cutters and you have the back of the cutters, it will always give you a nice straight edge. So just taking that tiny bit and cut in, you can see there that that's now nice and straight. Okay, so I'm going to take my round nose pliers and very gently going to place my pliers so that the edge of the wire is just nice and flush, but I'm going to go halfway down my pliers so that I've got a really good grip on this wire. Now with a heavier gauge of wire, so 1.5 gauge of wire, you need to just be very controlled and do little movements because it is a heavier gauge of wire. It does need a little bit more sort of control and strength. So what I do is I tend to rub the wire so that I'm almost encouraging part of the curve already in the opposite direction. So you can see I'm going to be turning my hand in this direction. So I'm kind of encouraging this part of the wire to form the other part. So again, if I put a piece here, I'm going to be doing this curve, but obviously you have this curve here. So I'm just starting to encourage that shape. So I'm going to turn with my hand with the pliers, but can you see how I'm using my finger just to keep that curve going there? So taking my pliers away, I'm starting to get that curve. Then I'm going to reposition my pliers so I can get a good grip again. And I'm just going to come in and really sort of pull. And now what I'm doing is almost keeping this hand here still. And I'm almost pushing against that to get that nice part of the spiral. And again, I'm just going to come in. I can control this a little bit more just to really get that nice start for that detail. And you see here with my hand, I'm almost kind of pushing that wire to make sure that I get that lovely curve here as well. Okay. Now, because it is, and this is why I say using a bare copper or a soft wire is going to go in your favour, because you can see how I can use my hands and I'm just encouraging that shape how I want it to go. Okay, so that's that part just there. Now, again, I'm a very visual person. I like to look at it and decide by eye where I want that sort of bend to go to form the other side of the heart, but you can measure it if you want to. So I'm going to just bring this wire down, and I'm probably going to go to this point here, just looking at it, but just for peace of mind. So yeah, that is probably at around about the 5 centimetre mark. Okay, now I'm going to take my chain nose pliers and come in just roughly where my where I'm holding that wire, and I'm just going to bend. And again, keeping hold of this wire with my pliers, using my hand to start to encourage that curve on the opposite side of the wire. So you can see that one little movement's already given me most of my shape for the heart already. And you'll be surprised at how much wire we've used just doing that one motion. So I'm going to come in now. Again, I'm just using my thumb to sort of encourage that curve. And I'm going to go back to my ring mandrel. So if you remember, I said I had the ring mandrel to help me get a nice shape. So I'm just placing my wire in. Sorry. And I'm just going to bring that all the way around. And again, going by your sort of eye, I'm going to look at, and I can move this wire up and down this mandrel to try to get a sort of similar shape and size to the opposite side. So I can make sure that that's kind of matching. Okay. So now what I'm going to do, now I do this every time I do these hearts, I do this. I like this wire to be at the back. So can you see how it's at the front at the moment? It's going over the front of the heart. So I'm just going to just quickly maneuver that to the back. Okay, so I'm just going to bring this down like this. And again, just little motions. I'm just very gently pulling this apart so that I can get a nice little gap just here. And I'm going to turn the piece over, and what I want to do, again, about level with this part of the spiral here, I'm going to take my chain nose pliers again quite towards the end because I don't want a big bend in the wire, and I'm going to bring the wire up, so it's going to almost go like that. Okay, and I can open this out a little bit because I can come back and reform this. And then I'm going to come back over to this section, turn it to the side, and then with these pliers I'm going to come in and I'm going to go to the widest part of my pliers, really grip that wire and really sort of pinch that together so I get that kind of motion. Okay, place it back. This is the beauty again of using this wire. And then, again, using my hand, turn it around. I'm going to bring this wire all the way around. Now, I can just, sorry, there we go. I can just shape this and bring this around like this. But obviously, I now have the wire here. I mean, I could cut that wire there and just wrap it. But I personally don't really like having cut ends of wire just exposed. So what I'm going to do is bring the wire into the heart frame, very gently pull it because I don't want to lose my shape. Okay, and manipulate this round so I can keep it, just using my hand to keep it how I want it to look. Okay, now I could come in with my pliers again and just gently reform that shape to how I want. Now I've got my wire going in just here, so what I'm going to do is take my chain nose pliers again and hold this really securely. Bring this wire up and around and back in to that frame. Okay. So it's going to look like that. And then I'm going to just come back in with my pliers and really manipulate that round. Again, sort of take your pliers and pinch. And then bring that back all the way inside. Okay. Come back and check it. Make sure you check it regularly. Make sure you haven't lost your shape and that you're happy with how it's actually sort of turning out, okay, and that you're happy with the balance. So this wire here, just straightening it out a little bit. So again, I didn't like the wrap part of it, so I wanted to distract from that. I will sort of cover that. So what I'm going to do is holding the plain wire we haven't worked with yet. And don't worry if this opens out, we can reform that in a moment. I'm just going to rotate the whole piece in my hand. Can you see how it's creating that curve? and kind of bring it all the way around. So it's given you a kind of a flourish over. You can move that down so it becomes more at the point of the heart. And then that brings my wire back up into the direction I want it to go, so that I can get this final matching kind of section here. So take your time with this. Make sure you're happy with that. I'm just taking my pliers, just tweaking it. Okay, and then if you remember, the other option that we had was your bail making pliers. Now these are the, if you buy these in the pair sets like this is the largest set. I believe it's an 8 and a 6 mil. And then I'm just going to bring the wire around the largest prong just to try and get a nice shape, really. Okay. Again, I'm just going to bring that all the way back. So I'm happy with this. Okay, and then I'm going to trim this probably a tiny bit. Now I can always, I've just taken literally probably like, what, 2 centimeters off there. And then what I can do, again, come in and just manipulate that into a spiral. Now it's better to do the spiral and have it too big, then come back and again just cut a little tiny bit more off so that I can gauge it that way. So it's better to sort of do it in tiny stages than cut too much wire off and not be able to get that match. So can you see I'm holding all of these 3 wires together, and then I can come in, I can really sort of pull that wire and shape it. So there's your sort of heart shape there. Okay, so this is an optional part, what I'm about to do. That's your basic frame. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hammer this, just because I think when you have a bare copper wire and you have it of this strength, it's great to just give it that additional texture. So I'm taking my sandbag and my steel plate, and again, apologies about the state of my plate. I'm taking my hammer, and this is a proper actual jewellery hammer. It's very heavy at the top, so it has got a heavy weight to it, which is great for when you are doing something like this, because you need to be able to hit this wire nicely. So go careful when you're using this. I mean, you could always take a little bit of masking tape and set it down, and in that way you haven't got to get your hands anywhere near it at risk of hammering your hands, because trust me, I've done it, it hurts. So holding the hammer nice and properly, so try not to do this, try not to do this when you're hammering, try to hold the hammer properly. And I'm going to come around here, and I'm just going to, this is probably going to make the camera shake, so I apologise, because it's all connected on the same table. So you hammer this, and you just go all the way around. Now if you just wanted to sort of strengthen the piece, you could just lightly hammer it, that will strengthen it. But if you want to actually visually change the texture and look of the piece, then you can hit it quite hard. And that's going to flatten and widen out areas of the piece. Now please don't hammer where your wires cross, so I want to go really gentle around this area just here where these 2 wires cross, and obviously we have this section here. I could give it a very light tap, but I don't want to hammer it too hard. And obviously when you hammer, you are going to change, it will move a little bit, and that's absolutely fine. You can place it back, and you will still be able to change the shape a little bit if you wanted to. So again, just doing your hammering like this. I'm going to do the rest of this in a moment off camera, so that I'm not shaking it too much, but just to show you what you can do afterwards. And also, just in case you can probably see, I'm going to hold this up for you to see. Move this so it's not confusing the camera. But can you see the little marks on the wire? Now that's happened because my hammer is marked, and that's just where I've used it for stamping and things like that. It's my general all-round hammer. Now if I turn the piece over, the back would be smooth, so you can see that. So my top tip for this is to have a couple of different hammers. Have one for your stamping, because that will create that kind of pitting on your hammer, and one, if you want that smooth, clean, finished look, have a plain hammer that you use purely for hammering your wire or your sheet. Now, on the other side of this hammer is this sort of rounded section, the ball section, and what I would then do is tap the areas that all that I want or that have just been hammered. And can you see how that's changed it? There you go, you can see that texture. So that is why I personally don't worry too much about using this particular hammer if I know I'm going to be texturing the piece as well. So what I'm going to do is just finish hammering this off. Okay, so I've just quickly hammered, flattened and textured this piece so that when you can see it in the light. And you'll also notice that just doing all of this motion, can you see how much it's almost self-polished just by being handled, hammered and textured. So I wanted to show you, you can see the difference. So it's gone from being, well, this one actually has been hammered but only lightly. This is the same gauge, but can you see how it's changed the whole? It's flattened out, it's widened out, and it's just changed the look of it completely. So there is practically your finished heart. Now, if you wanted to make it so like these are a little bit sort of out of line, so you can kind of still come in. Now, you can't do too much shape changing to it once you have hammered it, because the metal is effectively, the structure has been changed, so it's more difficult to create a sort of a curve or a fluid shape. But you can tweak what you have already done. So you can see I've just tweaked that just the tiniest bit, just to make these two sections here a tiny bit more balanced. Okay, I can also come along with my chain nose pliers and just kind of straighten and just change very minor details if I want to. But to be honest, it's best to try to make sure you're 100% happy with all of those details before you start hammering and changing it. So you can see that that is a little bit bigger than this one, but that's probably just because I'm trying to show the camera, so I'm not being as condensed as maybe I would be if I was sat working without a camera over me. So, final finishing touches to this. Now, the reason that I personally like to just pop a bit of wire here just to secure it is because if you do that, you can, even though you've used a 1.5, even though it's a hammered and textured, you can still pull that out of shape. So just for security, I'm going to take a tiny little scrap of 0.315 gauge wire. This is just a piece actually from my desk. And I'm just going to take the smallest length of this. I'm going to bring it into that section just there, so it sits in that little sort of dip and that little curve. And I'm just going to come around the wire about 3 times just to secure it. So 1, 2, and then 3. And then what I'm going to do is bring the wire straight across the back. Ooh. That was Maggie. Maggie's just come running in. So bring the wire straight across the back of the 2 wires here. And I just sort of pushing that up towards me. And then I'm just going to go around this wire here. So all the way around. And then back up. Okay. So that's just wrapped, and then I'm going to go into the middle, and then I'm going to come up through the other side again into this little curve section here. I'm going to wrap once, bring it back up and into that curve again, so it's twice, and then it goes into the middle of that gap there, and then over to the opposite side. Around once, and around twice. That's all you need to do. If you want to do any more, it's purely your personal taste. So I'm probably going to do one more rotation, run 2. Because I've started the wire on this side, I'm going to finish it on the opposite side. Again, that's just more of a visual thing. So I'm going to go around once, twice, and because this is the finish, I'm going to bring it around one more time. Make sure you've got a definite front and back. So this is obviously the front because the spiral is here. This is what it looks like from the back. This is where you can use, again, either your flush cutters, or if you do have a pair of your Zurons, which are obviously a finer point and can get in a little bit closer, then great, use those. Right across the front, so it's just across the front there. And again with the tail that you started with, making sure it goes exactly where you want it to go. Take your chain nose pliers again and just kind of gently go over that. Make sure that there are no sharp edges. Use your hand to make sure you can feel no edges. And that is basically your finished piece. Now, as I said, if you did want to polish this up now, this is where you can come in with your sort of sandpaper sponge and then just give this a nice, let me see how that's changed. So I'll just do 1/2. Now there will be areas that you won't be able to get to, but that's part of the look. So I've polished 1/2 here, but this half hasn't been done just yet, and you can see the difference. I personally just love how it changes the effect, and how by using that tarnished wire to start with, it saves you going through the oxidizing process. So if you do get any of that arrive, that's the back, see? You can see that darker colour, and then that's the front there. And this is what it would look like if you kept it plain. So again, that's personal preference, how you want to decorate it, really, what look you're looking for. I quite like when you have a chunky piece like this, that kind of rustic look, but it's everyone's personal preference. So just give that a little polish. You can obviously take a little bit more time. Just bringing that all the way around like that. Okay, and then I'm just going to grab a jump ring. Okay, so there's your finished heart. So what I wanted to do was add a jump ring. Now you can either get ready-made jump rings, pre-cut, pre-done, but they tend to be a lighter gauge. So you can see here that these are a bit thinner. These are ones that I've started to make using the 1.5mm wire, the same wire we use for the actual heart itself. These will work absolutely fine. These are copper coloured, so they're not bare copper, so they won't tarnish. So just be aware of that. If you add a coated copper element, it will remain shiny where the rest of the piece will tarnish. But that's it, made with a ready-made jump ring. And you can just attach that to a cord if you wanted to, or to some chain, have it as a long style, as a short style. The other option is to take another jump ring the opposite side. This one has gone a little bit, let's get rid of that one. Pop this one just on this side and close that one. So you could then add chain either side here and make it into a nice neck piece if you wanted. Just to show you, if you wanted to make your own jump rings, I've gone ahead using the same bell making pliers that we had earlier. I've used a smaller side. I've just wrapped the wire around a couple of times to coil it. Then using my flush cutters, again, my heavy duty ones. Remember what I said about the back cutting a nice straight edge? So just snip. So if I hold this up, you'll see that it's got that angle on it. So I'm just going to snip that straight. Turn my pliers around so that the flat side is going to be on the opposite side of the ring, and cut. And that will give me a nice jump ring. So you can see that closes up nicely, nice and straight. And if I wanted to have that so it tied in, you should really be using pliers to open and close jump rings, not your nails. That's me being lazy, and it's a bad habit. Don't do it. Okay, so there's that one. So again, I could pop that one onto here. I could, if I wanted to, take this, go back to the hammer. It's going to shake, so apologies. If I wanted to tap a bit of detail onto it. So this is where I would reach for probably another, so I'm just grabbing another pair of pliers. Because again, you'll work hard in it. Oopsie. Work hard in it. So just close that up. Sorry, my pliers are slipping because it's a lot stronger now. So opening and closing that, plus I'm trying to work around the camera. Just close that so it meets up nicely. There we go. And because it's bare copper, it's not going to, even if you slip with your pliers, it's not going to matter because you can polish any slips with the plier out. There you have your complete piece ready to go. So there you have it. I hope you like this project. If you do, please give me a thumbs up. Please click subscribe. I will be aiming to do at least one as a minimum tutorial a month, along with my unboxings and other things. So, you know, I hope you can stick around, and yeah, have a great day.